Now this video, I want to talk about a man called Lemual Smith. He's a prisoner. He's been in prison for the last 40 plus years. About 44 years I think he's been in prison for. And in 1981, 40 years ago, he allegedly killed a prison officer, a female prison officer called Donna Payant. Now, Donna Payant is the one in the picture above. The one below is somebody else he murdered. But with the Donna Payant murder, I really don't think it was him, and even her family don't think it was him. And I'll explain why. Now, even though Lemual Smith is a low-life serial killer, yeah, he's raped multiple women, he's killed multiple women, and he got sentenced to life in prison for those crimes. Well, in 1968, he raped a woman and he got 15 years, but got released in half that, which meant he killed again, which always happens in America. Yeah. A rapist or killer will get released just for them to do it again, you know. So, anyway, 1976, he brutally raped and mutilated, I think, 2 women, and he bit one on the nose. And I'll get to the bite mark thing later on, yeah. But anyway, he bit her on the nose, which left the bite mark. Anyway, he was convicted of that murder, and the bite mark thing was, his bite impression was compared to the bite mark on the nose. He got sentenced to life in prison in Green Haven Correctional Facility, where Donna Payant was working, and she was the first female prison officer to work at that prison, I think, anyway, or one of the first female prison officers to work at that prison. And the male officers at the time were, not all of them, but a lot of them were dodgy. They were dealing with the prisoners, you know, drug trafficking in prison. You know, it was like a gang basically, and the prison officers were the leaders. It was ridiculous. The corruption at prison was ridiculous at the time. And she threatened to blow the whole thing, you know. In 1981, by that time, Lemual Smith, the guy who just showed, the serial killer, got special privileges in the prison because he was seen as a model prisoner. He found God and all this bullshit, right? So he was like a model prisoner, and he got kind of more freedom in the prison than most prisoners did because of his good behaviour. Even though that prison was full of the worst prisoners, serial killers, rapists, mafia gang leaders, you know, African American mafia leaders, or white criminal biker gangs and serial killers. That prison was just full of the worst, pedophiles, everything, right? So one day, Donna Payant was seen speaking on the prison phone, and she slammed the phone down in anger. This is witnesses, of officers witnessed this. And then she stormed off. That was the last time she was seen alive. And the next thing, she was missing. They were looking high and low for her, nowhere to be seen, right? A few days later, she was found in a garbage, where they get rid of garbage. They found her in a horrendous condition, yeah, because the trash compactor crushed her body. She was put in there already dead. But when she was found, every single bone in the body was broken because of the trash compactor. Rats got to her body because of where she was, in a garbage dump, in that huge garbage dump, right? She was found, she was beaten, raped in every way, and there appeared to be a bite mark on her breast. So it became obvious that somebody in the prison killed her, yeah, because the part of the garbage lot where she was found, it was only the prison. The garbage came from the prison, because it's that kind of organised in a certain way. They know exactly where it came from. She never left the prison anyway, so it was obvious that somebody in the prison murdered her. And at first, police were interviewing prison officers, because how could a prisoner have done this, right? And even the prison officers themselves admitted, right, that they were doing dealings with prisoners, as in drugs and all sorts of it. So with this, they still couldn't find any evidence that any officer did the murder. So they turned to prisoners. And the first prisoner that came to their head was Lemual Smith here, because he had the most freedom. And he was in the prison chapel at the time of her disappearance. So the police did a search of the chapel. They found that the floor had been cleaned, which means nothing really, you know. They found some hair on the floor, which they think is similar to Donna Payant's hair. Still, it don't prove that he did it. But anyway, the next thing, the bite mark on her breasts. One of the pathologists, I think, said he recognised the bite mark. And I'm thinking, how can you recognise a bite mark? How? But they came to the conclusion that it was his bite mark, Lemual Smith's bite mark, because they compared his teeth impression to the bite wound on Donna Payant's breast. Lemual Smith denies this. Even to this day, he denies he did this murder. And he's got nothing to lose. Don't forget, he's got life in prison, even before this, right? If he did it, he'd admit it by now. Even Donna Payant's own sister, who sadly passed away now, even she never believed that it was Lemual Smith that did the murder. It was one of the prison officers. But anyway, he got blamed for it. Even though no DNA evidence was found. So there's nothing to tie him to the murder other than he had a bit of freedom in the prison. Even though it's a maximum security prison. Yeah, actually double max or something like that. It's a very, very tight security prison. How can a prisoner rape, sodomise and brutally murder an officer, clean up, dispose of the body in the prison trash, all that and not be seen by anybody? I know this was 1981, there's no camera, CCTV and all that, but even so, you don't need that to see somebody, a prisoner, being in places where he shouldn't be, and having the time and freedom to not kill another human being and get rid of the body. Doesn't sit well with me at all. Right. Now, this guy's a scumbag, you're right, but you can't try and convict somebody for a murder where there's no evidence apart from a bite mark, which could be anything. Their body was put in the trash can, right? It was crushed by a machine and dumped in a garbage lot, right? Where rats get to the body, bodies against all this different rubbish and glass, sharp objects, bean cans and tin openers, anything could have done that mark on a body, anything. Now this guy here is called Ray Crone, right? He's got nothing to do with this case, right? But the reason why I've mentioned him is because he was convicted of rape and murder and got sentenced to death, right? But luckily for him, DNA evidence proved it wasn't him. Not the bite mark, right? DNA evidence, which is the main thing these days when it comes to murder. Because the woman that he was supposed to have killed was raped and killed and supposed to have been bitten. And they tested his bite impression with the bite mark on that woman and it appeared to match. Even though he had absolutely nothing to do with that murder at all, right? He knew the woman, and the woman was closing a pub or something, or a restaurant, and she mentioned him because I think she liked him at the time, or she said that he'd be there, which he didn't even turn up. He didn't turn up because I don't think he really liked the woman that much, as in that way. But yet the police quickly put two and two together and thought, oh, it must be you, and sentenced him to death. Death, you know. But like I said, luckily for him, DNA exonerated him. And this is the point I'm making. Bite mark evidence is not evidence. It's opinion, not evidence, because this proves it. His story proves that bite mark impressions are not on bodies, on dead bodies. Bite marks, it's not like a fingerprint. And this is the same thing with Lemual Smith. Till this day, he denies he killed her. He said himself that they adopted the bite mark or the impression to make it look like his so they can convict somebody, because they were stuck at a dead end. They didn't know who it was who committed the murder. So what better to choose a murderer that's in prison for a similar crime? And not only that, he's a black man as well. Let's not hide away from the fact that when it comes to black men, it's easy to blame them. Yeah? It's been happening for years. But anyway, even Donna Payant's family don't believe he did it. They don't believe it at all. It was one of the dodgy ass prison officers that was working in that prison. They probably killed her because she was seen as a whistleblower, which means she was putting a stop to all their dodgy shit they were doing, all the lucrative drug business that they were doing with the prisoners. She was threatening to fuck all that up. And not only that, right, she was female as well. And there weren't many female prison officers at the time. She was actually the first female prison officer to be murdered on duty in America, in the history of America. The first female to be murdered. Female officer to be murdered. So at the time, and obviously, and something I didn't mention as well, is that when she first got the job at that prison, she was sexually harassed by one of the officers as well. Like he was making sexual advances and trying to touch her inappropriately. And she complained about that as well. So what does that tell you? It means she had enemies, male enemies, in prison officer uniform. I believe it. I don't believe he did it at all. Not at all. There's no evidence pointing to him at all. You can't just say, oh, because he had the freedom in the prison, he did it. This woman hasn't had justice. The real murderer, if he's still alive, is out there. You know, this is 40 years ago, so he could be dead by now. I don't know. He could be still alive. Probably still alive, you know. I mean, if she was alive now, she'd be about 65 or something. And hopefully one day she'll get the justice, because I think she's been let down by her own people and the system. Hopefully one day she'll get justice. Now I'm going to do some more crime videos, so if you want to stay tuned, subscribe. See you later.